What black market did kids at your school run? Story 1. These little game coupons that our teacher gave out for winning class quiz games. Right when people were starting to get scanners and printers in their own homes, some kid made copies of these coupons and sold or traded them to other students. Story 2. MP3s and CDRs were just becoming available, and a guy that I knew made a killing on mixed CDs. Every week, he circulated forms to fill out where you selected the songs that you wanted on the CD. The newest hits were on the top and changed weekly, and the rest of his library filled the rest of the form. And there was space for requests. He'd deliver your disc the following week. He seriously made bank for a couple of years until everybody started getting their own songs from LimeWire or whatever. I don't know what he's doing now, 20 years later, but I don't doubt that he's successful. Story 3. This girl Danielle convinced my best friend and I, along with some other people, that she could forever change the taste of saliva in our mouth, so that our saliva would taste like watermelon, cotton candy, bubblegum, etc. forever. She made us wait a couple of days so that we could really think about what flavor we wanted in our mouth forever, and for example, she would tell us, "Are you sure you always want everything you eat to have a hint of watermelon?" Anyways, after a couple days, we picked a flavor, and she charged us money. I can't remember how much it was, probably like 50 cents or something. She made us chew on this crazy stuff like paper clips, erasers, and other things. Obviously, our saliva never changed flavor, and she stopped this. But I worked at Starbucks a couple years ago in my hometown, and she came in and didn't even recognize me. And all I could think about was how that girl had me chewing on paper clips. Well, Danielle really had you guys going there. Sounds like she was trying to sell you the flavor-changing equivalent of a bridge in Brooklyn. I mean, who wouldn't want their saliva to taste like watermelon or cotton candy all the time? I guess the joke was on you, though, since you ended up chewing on all sorts of weird stuff and your saliva never changed flavors. At least now you can look back on the experience and laugh about it, even if Danielle doesn't remember you. Who knows? Maybe she's out there trying to sell other unsuspecting people on the idea of flavor-changing saliva. Story 4. Nintendo games. Some kids sold them off like 10 or 15 bucks a pop. I don't know where he got them from, but he said that he just told his dad what he wanted and then his dad would get it for him. He asked for the same ones over and over, and it didn't matter. He'd end up with 5 copies and he'd just sell 4 of them. Either the kid was the most spoiled brat in history, or his dad was straight up stealing them somehow. Anyways, I could never get any. I had a Sega, but I remember that kid making a killing in grade 3. Story 5. Apple laptops in middle school. Some had iTunes, some didn't, and the kids wanted it, so apparently I was the only one who knew how to transfer the installer with my USB, and I put it on everyone's laptop for gifts, favors, etc. Got caught by the sub that day, and I told her that it was my flash drive. I could do what I wanted with it. And that's how I got my second detention of my life. Story 6. I was in elementary school when Pogs were big. Everyone had cool slammers and stuff, but I didn't have money for good ones. My dad made one out of half-inch mild steel for me, and then used an engraving pen to make a simple pattern. Everyone was asking me where I got them from. I didn't want to lose my unfair edge, but I also knew I could make money from this. My dad had a big sheet of this half-inch steel, and I told them that I was the only one who could get them. I sold them for 15 bucks a pop. My dad kept 10 and I got 5. And that's when I learned what overhead was. It truly is amazing how creative these kids can be when they want to make a quick buck. I bet your dad was pretty proud of himself for making that slammer out of 12-inch steel, and he probably didn't expect it to become such a hot commodity among your classmates. Also kind of hilarious that you were able to convince everyone that you were the only one who could get them, although I guess that's true. It's a good thing that you were able to make a profit even if your dad took most of the money. I guess that's just the cost of doing business. You've got to cover your overhead after all. Story 7. I lived in an area with a lot of retiree-aged people, and a lot of which ended up raising their grandchildren. It really isn't a good idea. Now, being older from a rural area, still don't trust online sites like eBay or Amazon, so I started ordering people things from those sites for actual money and added a charge for me to be making money off of it. And eventually got shut down because I got someone a USB in the shape of a pistol, and it was the size of a USB and clearly a USB, but it didn't matter. The principal actually got the police involved to try to get me into real trouble. Story 8. Marbles were big at my primary school, like really big. It got to the stage where they were only allowed for 3 months a year, as we would no longer discuss anything but the game. We had to make our own that we wanted to pay for. That was marble season. Now, you could buy a big bag of cat eyes from a supermarket, but they wouldn't get you far. To play the high-stakes game, you needed a specked egg, a glitter bomb, a tidal wave, or something exotic. But those suckers were pricey. Now, us poor kids couldn't afford those things, so we secretly gambled our marbles through the year, so when marble season opened, we had amassed enough marbles to really be ahead of the game. Being caught with marbles outside of marble season was bad, like real bad. One kid got 5 strokes of the cane. This being so it was a big risk to hide in the shadows of the trees and sling those little glass balls about. Not only did it hone your skills for the season start, but you got good at taking the shot and then acting nonchalant. Marbles were currency. You could trade lunches with them or buy time on playground equipment. There was a good reason they banned marbles at my school. We had turned it into some sort of mafia. Story 9. I ran it. For a few spare years in elementary, books got banned in the classroom. Not blacklisted books, but literally books in general. They were far too distracting, even though most kids read when done with their work. I started smuggling books to school and peddling them out to kids. It started out innocently, and I had loads of Hank the Cowdog books that I was super into, and I had them in my desk. And I loaned them out to close friends when asked. But soon, the entire class knew. And then that spread to the school. I became a full-time book smuggler. I had a system where there was a 2-week borrowing limit, kept a log of who, what book, and when, ran a teensy little library for myself, and basically, I had made sure that these kids were treating the books fairly. If anything came back damaged, they were banned from borrowing. Kept this up until middle school, which was considerably less totalitarian. Story 10. During elementary school in the 80s, many candies weren't individually wrapped for resale in stores, like think Wartheads, etc. I bought bulk packs of candy, didn't matter what kind, although atomic fireballs were my cash cow. I individually packed them, or maybe a couple to a pack depending on the candy, and I used those tiny Ziplocs that you see people use for drugs. Being around adults a little devoid of scruples, I was able to get those in bulk from a local head shop called High on the Hill. It was a surreal time looking back. I was the only supplier for a solid year in 4th grade, and I made so much bank for a 10-year-old that it was insane. I would make $100 a week just off of atomic fireballs. The bulk jugs were about $5 or $6 each wholesale, and at a quarter each, it worked out to be about $60 a jug profit if I recall. Now, luckily, school came easy to me because it was a full-time job keeping stock, packaging product, counting piles of change, budgeting, keeping a bank register. Mom kept a separate account that I used for my money, and dodging the man, etc. It was turbulent as I never really had a group of friends as I was a kid, but in the 4th grade, I was the man. Going from having no real good friends and having my time divided by either being picked on or ignored to becoming the belle of the ball was surreal. Even at that time, I was able to realize what was going on. Their smiles were all fake. Their interest was not in me, but rather that was in my bag that given day. Girls were not saying hello because they were being polite or even the least bit interested in talking to me. They were just waiting their turn for their fix. That denim bag got more attention than I ever dreamed of, and I was just along for the ride. I had laid the groundwork and provided the blueprint. When the 5th grade started, now there was competition, but they were weak. They would always sell out or only buy enough to make a few bucks here and there, largely selling lollipops or pre-packed stuff, Hershey Kisses, bit of honey or Tootsie Rolls, whatever they could grab at the store before school. It was amateur hour. They made a mockery of something that I took seriously, and as seriously as a 10 and 11-year-old can make something. I closed up shop pretty quickly after the school year began. The fast life and the fast money was over. The excitement wasn't there. The smiles just weren't as big. Kids came to me as a last resort, and they bought the popular kids' candy completely out first before looking my way. It was like flipping a switch. My first day without the bag, I had a few kids ask if I was holding, but once word got out that I was out of the game, everything went back to normal. No friends, no conversation, no one to sit with at lunch or on the bus, no one interested, fake or otherwise. It's the first time I ever really witnessed the dynamic of being disingenuine. I had always been authentic, and after it was all over, I was happy to stay that way. I've never really recounted this time into words. As it turns out, I learned a lot of life lessons in the 4th grade. Well, what a wild ride that must have been. It sounds like you were quite the entrepreneurial spirit, even at a young age. I can imagine how exhilarating it must have felt to have that kind of power and influence among your peers. And it's also interesting to hear about how you came to understand the importance of authenticity and genuine connections, especially at such a young age. It sounds like you learned quite a few valuable lessons from that experience, even though it did come with its ups and downs. Story 11. I was a Pokemon card smuggler. In the 6th grade, my friend's dad overheard my friend and I talking about how much our Pokemon cards were worth. He was shocked to learn that some of them were worth $10 to $20 a piece. He made the comment, "Man, shame they won't be worth that much when you go to sell them." Now that comment stuck with me, and a few days later, I started selling my cards at school. I made a list of everything that I had prices next to them. I'd pass the list around during class, and kids would meet up with me between classes to buy what they wanted. I was making crazy amounts of money for a middle schooler, and before long, parents were complaining that their kids were skipping lunch because they were spending their lunch money on Pokemon cards. So, the school banned them. But I still had a good bit of inventory to move. I did all kinds of things to avoid getting caught. I hid cards in a box of crayons. I put a few sheets of sleeves in the middle of a binder full of legit notes. I even hollowed out an old textbook to hide all my cards. Now, despite getting searched 3 to 5 times over the next few weeks, my cards were never found, and I was able to sell them all before Christmas break. I ended up making close to $800 and was able to buy my entire immediate and extended family Christmas gifts with my own money for the first time. Once all the other kids learned how much money I had made, they were blown away, and suddenly everyone was selling their cards. Problem was, no one was buying them anymore. Story 12. I used to deal in whiteboard markers for teachers in high school. Now, one teacher had a tendency to hoard them, leaving none for the other teachers, and I would take markers from him and then provide them to the other teachers in need. While there was no formal payment, I was given a little bit more leniency at times, like requests to leave the classroom for a moment, etc. Now, once a marker would start squealing on the whiteboard because it was almost empty, I'd get teachers giving me a nod as if to say, "You got the goods?" I'd then supply them with the marker color of their choosing, usually black, and it was actually a lot of fun. And I never heard teachers talk about my systems or chastise me for taking markers. Story 13. I was the dirty magazine dealer when I was in middle school in the 80s. Now, first I found my parents' adult stash. Boxes and boxes and boxes stashed away. Basement boxes by the washing machine and under the Civil War swords, the guest bedroom under the bed, at least like 50 of them, standing cabinet in the kitchen, cabinets near the ceiling, all over the bedroom, under the china. We were riddled with it. Yeah, I went through my parents' bedroom and there were hundreds of mags in the house, and I was only 11. Only God and my parents knew that I was in there, and I had to find out. Now, after I'd gotten bored with some, I started selling them to other kids. $20 each in, 1984 was a decent amount of money. The adult magazine market was booming, selling to other adolescents. Like, I had a client base, and then I had to get more. I then go into the bookstore and ask for the most esoteric book that I could imagine. The clerk would go check in the back, and then I'd stuff all the Penthouse and Playboy mags in my bag and book it. Maybe a comic book too, treat yourself. Many years later, I returned to my hometown and went to that same bookstore. I wanted to apologize and try to make up for it somehow. It was gone. Sorry about that, Walden Books. We were boys and you had adult magazines, so you get it. Well, looks like you've got a true entrepreneur on your hands. Like, who needs a lemonade stand when you can sell adult magazines at $20 a pop? This middle schooler was clearly ahead of their game, finding a lucrative market and taking advantage of their parents' extensive collection. Let's not forget his resourcefulness in tricking bookstore clerks into unknowingly providing him with more inventory. Who knew that all it takes to start a successful business is a little bit of curiosity and a lot of dirty magazines? Story 14. My school was an extremely conservative Christian boarding school. Now, things that were forbidden were by no means a complete list, but jeans for girls, shorts for everyone, candy, any sort of food in the dorms, cell phones, any form of gaming system, TV, movies, playing non-Christian songs on musical instruments, clothes made by popular brands like A&F and Hollister. Now, naturally, there were a few students who started selling food, candy, and that type of clothing. Why people bought these from them, I don't know, but they made huge amounts of money. A lot of the kids at that school were rich doctors' kids, so there was plenty of money to go around. One guy sold a box of Altoids for $15. Story 15. Myself and 3 other kids, all Asian, sold these Asian jelly straws, something that non-Asian kids are unfamiliar with, but were in love with once they were discovered. Caramel apple pops and Mexican lollipops. There was a large Latin community and saw the opportunity to make some money there. These lollipops are covered in tahini. Now, each straw was 25 cents, 5 for $1, and pops would go for 75 cents to $1 depending on the demand. We would each have a jar of the jelly straws in our own locker, a bag of the pops, and a small box of quarters and cash. Every period, we would restock our backpacks and then sell them while walking to and from class and in our class period. It was great. And as a middle schooler, $20, split between 4 of us, like $5 per kid a day, was the equivalent of making 6 figures now in adult life. Life was awesome. Until one day my friend's locker got broken into. Someone had watched over his shoulder when he put in his locker combination and then came back later. They took all the snacks, all the cash, like $100 worth, and everything else was in the trash. The school eventually banned the jelly straws, but not the pops, and made students who got caught reselling snacks get suspended. My 3 friends and I were content back then, but we made roughly $2,000 from our classmates and still got to eat the Asian straws at home. Now I work 40 hours a week to pay rent and eat fast food. Growing up sucks. Story 16. We created an entire black market currency and economy based on rocks. I used to manage one of 3 mining operations that were running concurrently on the elementary school playground back in the mid to late 90s. The school was located in a small town in southeast Tennessee. very rural, and bordered by the Cherokee National Forest. The shinier or smoother the rock, the more valuable that it would be. Rocks were traded between kids and their peers for snacks, drinks, homework, bribes, even protection from bullies. Now, whoever controlled the rocks controlled the playground. My operation had the largest kids, using the biggest boulders that were chipped into rounded points to break up the largest rocks down to manageable sizes for a bunch of little kids. And then we had the most hands with sticks and sharp-edged rocks for digging and dirt displacement. At the end of the day of work, we would then place a huge rock on top of our mining hole, too big for most anyone to lift, besides a select few guys who all worked for me. Now, of course, I'm sure any of the 4th, 5th, or 6th graders could have, all the time, had they cared too. 2 other operations also existed. One was made up of all girls, though their rock output was shabby at best. And another group that had their work inside of the dome-shaped jungle gym, providing the best protection from intruders and thieves, while also providing line-of-sight obstruction to the teachers and others. Now, as a manager, I would walk to the edge of the playground looking for strong sticks and perfect digging rocks, because the durability of sticks and pieces of chipped rock required a pretty steady supply of unbroken tools to work with. On the occasion that the classes had recess at different times, a lot of thievery and sabotage would also happen. Rocks would get stolen, and mining holes would get filled with trash and debris, and I recently visited the old school, which was closed in the mid-2000s, and it's now abandoned and has fallen into disrepair. The hole, though, it's still there. All this time, and they still haven't fixed the impact that my class and others had on that old playground. That's about all I can remember from the experience, but I still do have my own personal collection of rocks from that playground that I took home about many years ago in elementary school. A box full of stupidity and imagination. Well, I'm actually genuinely impressed by the ingenuity and resourcefulness of these young entrepreneurs. It's a shame that the school didn't actually recognize and reward their business sense with some sort of financial literacy class or entrepreneurship program. Maybe they could have expanded to trading other playground treasures like marbles or pogs. But who knows? Maybe one day we'll see these former elementary school students on Shark Tank pitching their newest business ideas or something like that.